Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it's the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the Make It Out Alive broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, we are glad to be back. We got a great new episode lined up for you. This is our true crime edition of the MOA broadcast. We're going to try and keep this simple in the beginning. And then, like before, as I mentioned in last week's episode, we're going to transition into a manuscript style reading for the true crime version of this. Keeps things nice and concise. Helps me to prevent forgetting any points I want to make and going off and just talking extemporaneously and adding a whole bunch of time to the whole broadcast that no one needs. So that being said, we got a great show lined up for you today. Remember, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, feel free to email us at info@gearconvoy.com. That's our website, www.gearconvoy.com. We have all kinds of survival. The MOA broadcast goes out on the weekends, and it's an hour-long show. We talk about the Make It Out Alive aspect, situational preparedness and awareness and survival, wilderness survival, all sorts of things. This is our true crime episode. We keep this around 35 minutes or so and go through a true crime story every week also. So you can find more information at gearconvoy.com. Hit the MOA broadcast tab at the top. It explains how to get the Spotify on the Spotify platform, the Patreon version where we have videos and all kinds of other stuff. But that's gearconvoy.com. Hit the MOA broadcast tab at the top or wherever it is on your phone or tablet and check that out. Okay, let me have a sip of water and then we'll get down to our subject at hand today. All right. We've been doing a mafia theme for our MOA broadcast true crime series, and let's continue. We did Anthony DeSimone last week, Two-Gun Tommy from Goodfellas. This week we're going to do Anthony the Ant Spilotro. Now you may recognize that name or the story from the movie Casino, another Scorsese film. This character was played by Joe Pesci. I believe he had the name Nicky Santoro or something to that effect in the film. That was based on Anthony Spilotro, which we're going to get into here shortly. As always, when you start doing research into mafia stuff and murder stuff, especially going back 30, 40, 50, 60 years, it's almost impossible to get all the data and the truth and the facts and everything else. So what we've done, as always, we've tried to get the most accurate information possible, compile it, and then we kind of go from there. I'm sure everyone's going to have a different opinion on how this went down or that happened. I can't, help all of that. There's so many different versions of a lot of events that have taken place. That's just life when it comes to these sort of crime stories and things like that. Also, be aware if you have kids listening, we try and keep this family friendly, but unavoidably when dealing with things like mafia, murders, and things like that, there are a few graphic details. Again, we try and bleep out any profanity or anything like that, but some of the subject matter is a little on the graphic side. All right, that being said, thanks for joining us, folks. We got a great show lined up, and let's get right into it. Okay. Anthony the Ant Spilotro. Birth date, May 19, 1938. Birthplace, Chicago, Illinois. Death, June 14, 1986, 48 years of age. Nicknames, The Ant, Tough Tony. He had a lot of different associations and associate members. There was the Outfit, the Hole in the Wall Gang, Frank Lefty Rosenthal, Frank Collada, the Teamsters Union, Tony Accardo, Frank Bumpancero, etc. And now we get into the meat of the story. Early life. Born Anthony John Spilotro on May 19, 1938, he was one of 6 children, all boys: Vincent, Victor, Patrick, Johnny, and Michael. He was born and raised in The Patch, a West Side Chicago neighborhood inhabited by many Italian immigrants in the 1940s and 50s. His parents, Pasquale and Antoinette Spilotro, had immigrated from Italy and owned and ran a cafe, Patsy's Restaurant. It was through the restaurant that he got introduced to organized crime. Patsy's was a known mobster hangout, and meetings and business between mafia members were frequently conducted in the restaurant's parking lot. Spilotro began high school at Steinmetz, but when his father had a stroke and died the following year, he dropped out and entered the world of crime. 4 out of his 5 brothers eventually became members of the Chicago mob. Anthony and his brothers were frequently involved in criminal activities together, with their early crimes consisting of petty theft, purse snatching, shoplifting, and occasionally violence. Spilotro had a reputation for fighting and violence at an early age. After the death of his father and his subsequent dropout of school, he turned his attention more increasingly to crime. He was first arrested at the age of 16 for stealing a garment, possibly a shirt. This earned him a fine and probation. The punishment did not, however, deter him from crime. It seemingly served to increase his criminal activities, and by his early 20s, he had been arrested several times. Petty crime was no longer enough to pay the bills, though, and he decided to widen the scope of his criminal endeavors and began pursuing organized crime in the Chicago area. This also garnered him more attention from law enforcement and federal authorities. Spilotro was nicknamed Tony the Ant by the media after FBI Special Agent William Romer publicly referred to him as that little pissant. Since the media could not use pissant, they changed it to the Ant. Moving up in the outfit. By the early 1960s, Spilotro had ingratiated himself to several major members of an organized crime family and had gained their support and guidance. He joined Mad Sam DeStefano's crew in 1962, and DeStefano would prove to be very influential on Spilotro in a number of ways. DeStefano was considered unpredictable, brutal, undisciplined, and downright insane by many, even in the mob. While this would prevent him from rising high into the ranks of mob leadership, it placed him very highly in demand by other bosses, as his sick and sadistic methods were very effective in striking terror into the hearts of both his victims and those who learned how they died, often very slowly. Not only were mobsters and their associates afraid of him, those on the other side of the law wanted to keep a safe distance, too. One of DeStefano's associates stated that he once saw DeStefano roll on the floor with spit running from his mouth, begging Satan to show him mercy and screaming over and over again, "I'm your servant, command me." To give you an idea of DeStefano's reputation, he was widely considered to be one of, if not the worst torture murderer in the history of the United States. The outfit, which is how the mafia in Chicago was referred to at the time, used the mentally unstable and sadistic DeStefano for the torture murders of Leo Foreman, Arthur Adler, and many others. He was also believed by some to be a devil worshipper. His many crimes included convictions for rape and bank robbery, involvement in political fixing, and loan sharking. It is in the loan sharking business that DeStefano really began to grow in his violent endeavors. He would often make loans to high-risk people with a high probability of defaulting. And just why would he do that? He actually enjoyed when debtors did not pay on time, as this gave him reason to bring them to his soundproof torture chamber some claimed he had built in the basement of his home. According to reports, he would actually foam at the mouth while torturing his victims for hours on end. Other claims suggest that he would occasionally kill those who only owed him small sums, just to scare other debtors into paying their bigger debts. DeStefano was also known to give his loan shark victims presents, things like jewelry and watches with his own name engraved on them, as though they were a legitimate present, so that if he wound up killing his victim for defaulting on the loan, he could use the engraved gift as proof that he was close friends with the victim and thus could not have killed him. In one instance, Peter Capoletti, a collector for DeStefano, fled Chicago with $25,000 from a loan shark victim. He was located in Wisconsin and brought back to Chicago. DeStefano then chained Capoletti to a radiator in the back of a restaurant and tortured him for 3 days, while there was a celebration going on in the front of the restaurant. When he could no longer take any more, Cappelletti begged, "Kill me, man, please. I'm on fire." To which DeStefano replied, "Then we need to put the fire out," before he had his men drag the severely burned Cappelletti into the dining area of the restaurant and forced the man's family to urinate on him together. This had the desired effect, and the stolen money was paid back quickly. Ironically, it is Spilotro that is alleged to have killed DeStefano, his mentor. When DeStefano was on trial for murder, his bizarre behavior, including wearing pajamas to court and screaming out of a bullhorn, worried the bosses, and the go-ahead was given for his killing. On April 14, 1973, DeStefano was supposed to meet with his brother, Mario Anthony DeStefano, and his own protege, Tony Spilotro, in the garage of DeStefano's own home, in the 1600 block of North Sayre Avenue. Before the meeting began, Spilotro allegedly entered the lot and shot DeStefano twice with a shotgun, hitting him in the chest and tearing his left arm off at the elbow, instantly killing him. The murder was never brought to trial. Now we have an idea on the background and some of the influences that shaped Tony Spilotro, and it is clearly not for the faint of heart. This leads us to a major event in the career of Spilotro, the M&M murders. The M&M murders refer to the 1962 killings of William Billy McCarthy and James Mad Dog Moralia, two burglars from Elmwood Park, Illinois. These murders were allegedly orchestrated by the Chicago Outfit, the city's largest and most powerful organized crime syndicate, and are believed to have been a pivotal event in Tony Spilotro's rise within the organization. The victims, McCarthy and Moralia, had killed 2, some stories say 3, thieves in Elmwood Park, a neighborhood where many crime bosses lived and was supposed to be off-limits to mob and criminal activity. The situation had to be dealt with decisively. McCarthy and Moralia were allegedly lured to a fast food restaurant by Frank Collada, a member of Spilotro's burglary crew. Once there, they were captured and taken to a basement where they lived out the rest of their lives in extreme pain and suffering. Spilotro wanted to send a message to anyone else thinking about operating out of bounds, so, according to reports, he savagely tortured the men before killing them. One detail from those murders was dramatized in the hit motion picture Casino. Spilotro put McCarthy's head in a vise, tightening it until his eye burst from his skull and then his throat was slashed, while Moralia was strangled. Their bodies were later found in the trunk of a car on May 14, 1962. This act reportedly solidified Spilotro's position within the organization, marking a turning point in his criminal career. In 1983, Spilotro was indicted in Las Vegas on murder and racketeering charges based on Collada's testimony. However, the charges were dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Subsequently, Spilotro was tried in Chicago for the Moralia and McCarthy killings. Judge Thomas J. Maloney acquitted him, dismissing Collada's statements as insufficient proof. Ironically, Judge Maloney himself was later convicted of accepting bribes in several cases, including murder cases. The move to Las Vegas. Spilotro's activities in Las Vegas were a major part of his criminal career, and they highlight his significant role in expanding the Chicago Outfit's influence in the city. Here are some of the more notable or possibly notorious events in his time there. In the 1970s, Las Vegas was a major gambling hub, and organized crime figures from all over the country, especially the Chicago Outfit, wanted a piece of the action. So, in that effort, the outfit sent Spilotro, along with others, out to Vegas to take control of the city's casinos, rackets, and other illegal operations. Spilotro arrived in Las Vegas in the mid-70s to oversee the outfit's interests and ensure that they were taking a cut from the casinos, including from both legal and illegal activities. His role was to protect the outfit's interests while keeping a low profile. He became involved in multiple illicit activities, ranging from extortion, loan sharking, and skimming operations to more violent actions like murder and assault. He worked alongside his crew, including former mobster Frank Collada, to oversee these operations. Protecting the skim. One of the most lucrative criminal activities Spilotro was involved in was skimming, and one of his primary activities in Vegas was to protect the skim from anyone else who wanted a piece. Skimming is when the mob takes a percentage of the casino's earnings before they were officially recorded on the books. Spilotro's primary role, which was key in the whole process, was to oversee the process of skimming cash from the casinos controlled by the Chicago outfit. His job was to ensure that money was taken off the top before it was accounted for, which would then be sent back to the outfit. This was a large-scale, organized crime operation where millions of dollars were siphoned away from the casino's official earnings and pocketed by mobsters. By the late 70s, the Chicago outfit had infiltrated several high-profile casinos, including the Stardust Hotel and Casino and the Fremont Hotel. The process was surprisingly complex but efficient. The mob would use employees within the casino to help skim cash before it could be officially recorded. Often, these employees would collect the money directly from the casino floors or from the vaults and then divert it without it ever being documented. Spilotro, as the outfit's man in Vegas, would ensure that all the money was funneled to the right people back in Chicago. The casinos Spilotro was involved with, especially the Stardust and other properties, were considered some of the most lucrative in the city. While the casinos seemed to be thriving on the surface, the skimming operations allowed the mob to secretly take a significant percentage of the earnings without anyone suspecting. The mob also often controlled certain key positions in these casinos, giving them the power to pull off these operations. Spilotro had a reputation for being a violent enforcer. His duties in Vegas went beyond skimming money. He was also responsible for making sure that the mob's interests were protected in the casinos, dealing with anyone who might challenge the outfit's control or interfere with the skimming operation. However, Spilotro wasn't just an enforcer. Over time, he became a key player in the Las Vegas underworld, managing a network of associates and even controlling the skimming operation itself. His violent tendencies and willingness to use intimidation or murder as a means of maintaining order made him feared within the mob and beyond. The Hole-in-the-Wall Gang. Tony Spilotro's Hole-in-the-Wall Gang was one of the most notorious criminal groups in Chicago outfit history, and its activities were as bold as they were violent. The gang was named after a tactic used during robberies, breaking into buildings through walls or windows, allowing them to access areas like vaults and cash rooms that were otherwise difficult to reach. The Hole-in-the-Wall Gang was a specialized team of burglars and robbers who operated mainly in Las Vegas during the 70s and early 80s. But their criminal activities stretched beyond just theft. They were involved in a variety of high-risk operations, often marked by violence and ruthlessness. Here we go into a little more depth concerning their activities. The primary activity of the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang was high-end burglary. They specialized in breaking into casinos, wealthy homes, and business establishments, often using hole-in-the-wall techniques to gain access. The gang was skilled at bypassing alarm systems and cutting through walls or ceilings to reach the vaults, safes, or cash rooms without triggering any security measures. Once inside, they would rob the cash and valuables, making a clean getaway. Casino robberies. Many of their burglaries were linked to the skimming operations Tony Spilotro was involved in, although separate from the skim itself. In some cases, they targeted casinos that were involved in the mob skimming network, knowing there was a steady flow of cash that they could steal. They would steal cash or valuables from the casino's safe without leaving a trace. Business and home robberies. Apart from casinos, the gang also targeted high-value businesses and the homes of wealthy individuals, usually with the goal of getting their hands on large sums of money or valuable items. The Hole-in-the-Wall Gang wasn't just a group of burglars. They were also very violent and intimidating. If things went wrong during a job, the gang members didn't hesitate to use brutal force to control the situation, often killing anyone who posed a threat or could identify them later. Their enforcer-like methods were crucial to the operation. Spilotro, known for his extreme brutality, would ensure that anyone who stood in their way was either intimidated into silence or permanently silenced. One method he is reported to have used was particularly savage, known as the shark tank. This was quite literally where he would drop people into a pool or tank of water with live sharks in it, where they would be brutally torn to pieces and devoured. This method was used for intimidation, murder, and to signify the dominant aggression of their crew. This combination of subtlety with their expert burglaries and aggression with their willingness to use extreme violence made them a fearsome crew. The 1977 hole-in-the-wall robbery. In 1977, Spilotro and his crew executed one of the most audacious heists in Las Vegas history. They targeted the Stardust Casino, which was one of the major casinos controlled by the Chicago outfit at the time. The Stardust was a major player in the Las Vegas Strip, and as such, it became a prime target for the outfit's skimming operations. The heist was daring for several reasons. Inside knowledge. The robbery was carried out with intimate knowledge of the casino's layout and security systems. This type of information was typically available only to those with inside connections to the outfit. The hole-in-the-wall method. The crew used their signature tactic, cutting a hole through the wall of the casino's secure area, which allowed them to bypass security systems and alarms. They did this without attracting the attention of casino staff or law enforcement. Once inside, the crew accessed a vault filled with cash and casino chips that were part of the mob's skimming operation. This vault held millions of dollars in unreported earnings, which were being secretly skimmed from the casinos, which also meant that reporting the theft to the authorities would be difficult, as the money was not supposed to exist in the first place. The robbery's impact. The heist was significant because it wasn't just a robbery. It was a direct blow to the organized crime operations that Spilotro and the Chicago outfit had established in Las Vegas. The stolen funds, primarily skimmed money, were part of the outfit's operations to launder illicit earnings and maintain control over the casinos. The audacity of the robbery made headlines and drew the attention of both law enforcement and rival criminals. It was another example of Spilotro's growing power in the city, as well as his ability to operate with impunity. The aftermath. While Spilotro's crew managed to escape with millions of dollars in the heist, the robbery was not without consequences. Increased scrutiny from the FBI and other law enforcement agencies began focusing even more on mob activity in Las Vegas after the robbery. The high-profile nature of the crime made it difficult for the outfit to remain under the radar. The heist also created internal tension between Spilotro and other members of the outfit. His bold actions began to attract unwanted attention, and his behavior grew increasingly erratic. This led to a series of events that eventually took down the hole-in-the-wall gang and, arguably, Spilotro himself. Frank Collada, who had been a close associate of Spilotro, eventually turned informant. Collada's testimony would later help law enforcement dismantle Spilotro's operations. However, at the time of the robbery, he was one of Spilotro's most trusted enforcers. Collada, being informed on himself by a dissatisfied associate and accomplice, was arrested on charges of receiving stolen goods. While out on bail awaiting trial, he and the rest of the hole-in-the-wall gang were caught in the act of burglarizing Bertha's Home Furnishings on July 4, 1981. It was this failed heist that ended the gang and sent most of its members to prison. Now facing two separate sets of charges and a long time behind bars, Collada also became a target of his boss and childhood friend, Tony Spilotro. The FBI informed Collada that Spilotro had become suspicious of him and had set Collada up for a contract killing. Not long after, Collada flipped on Spilotro and then entered the witness protection program. The noose was tightening on Spilotro, but his fate wasn't quite sealed yet. The 1977 hole-in-the-wall robbery, however, remains a symbol of the type of violent, reckless crime that Spilotro and his crew were known for. It also highlights the extent to which the Chicago outfit infiltrated the Las Vegas casino industry, controlling everything from the management to the skimming operations. While Spilotro's actions were eventually his downfall, leading to his murder in 1986, the heist and the methods used by the hole-in-the-wall gang have become iconic in the history of mob activity in Las Vegas. The robbery was also depicted in movies and documentaries, particularly in Martin Scorsese's Casino, 1995, where Joe Pesci's character Nicky Santoro, who is based on Spilotro, engages in similar types of violent, criminal behavior in the casino world. Spilotro's downfall and violent end. Towards the end of his career in Vegas, Spilotro became more powerful, but also increasingly hard to control, difficult to deal with, and the level of violence and police scrutiny had escalated. A number of factors led to the decision to retire him permanently. Some of these factors included increased law enforcement scrutiny. By the mid-1980s, Spilotro had become a marked man. Law enforcement was closing in on the outfit's skimming operations and Spilotro's own violent actions. The FBI, the Nevada Gaming Commission, and other law enforcement agencies were investigating him for multiple crimes, including racketeering, extortion, and murder. Spilotro's increasingly violent and unpredictable behavior alienated many people, both within the outfit and outside it. His actions became more reckless, and his temper grew more volatile. He reportedly threatened outfit members, including John Gotti and others in the mafia, and began to exhibit behavior that made the outfit leadership fear he might bring too much heat to their operations. Internal politics in the outfit. Spilotro was a high-ranking member of the Chicago outfit, but he was not part of its upper echelons back in Chicago, where the real decision-makers were. Spilotro's rising power in Las Vegas began to upset the balance of power within the outfit. The leadership likely viewed him as a threat to their own authority. His behavior, combined with mounting pressure from law enforcement, made him vulnerable and expendable. Additionally, Spilotro had been having a not-so-secret affair with Jerry McGee, a former showgirl and the wife of Frank Lefty Rosenthal, a key figure in the Las Vegas casino world. Mob boss Joey the Dove Zayupa was reportedly incensed that Spilotro was openly involved with the wife of mob associate Lefty Rosenthal. Rosenthal, a mob-connected bookmaker and casino operator, was hired by the outfit to run the Stardust Casino, one of the most lucrative properties in Vegas. He was deeply involved in the mob skimming operations. The affair, combined with Lefty's increasingly dangerous association with the mob, contributed to his eventual downfall. Rosenthal's position in the mob was precarious because he was a highly visible figure in the casino world. The mob wanted him to run the casino operations quietly and efficiently, but his behavior became more erratic as tensions rose between him and Spilotro and between him and the outfit. The betrayal by Frank Collada. Collada, a former associate of Spilotro mentioned earlier, turned informant for the FBI in the mid-1980s. Collada's testimony provided critical information about Spilotro's criminal activities and connections. As Spilotro's world began to crumble, it is likely that his once loyal associates started distancing themselves, either to avoid prosecution or because they saw him as a liability. The violent end. A quick note. Many different versions of what happened to the Spilotro brothers exist. There is no way to know today exactly what happened, so here we are going to present the known facts and one of the more accepted versions of events. Feel free to do your own research into the matter. On June 14, 1986, the brothers, Tony and Michael Spilotro were lured to a meeting with the premise of a promotion for Tony and Michael being a made man. They drove away from Tony's South Oak Park townhouse around 2 p.m. on a Saturday in Michael's Lincoln Continental. It is likely the brothers realized something was amiss. According to an FBI document, Michael Spilotro told another person that if he didn't come back from the Bensonville meeting, quote, it was no good, end quote. His wife, Ann, confirmed that in court, saying, quote, he said if he wasn't back by 9 o'clock, it was no good. Michael Spilotro's daughter, Michelle, told the court her father told her he loved her at least 10 times before leaving June 14. Both men reportedly removed all of their valuables and personal identification before leaving the house and then left together. Michael's car, a 1986 Lincoln, was recovered several days later in a motel parking lot near O'Hare International Airport. On June 22nd, their bodies were found, one on top of the other and stripped down to their underwear, buried in a cornfield in the Willow Slough Preserve near Enos, Indiana. The freshly turned earth had been noticed by a farmer who thought that the remains of a deer killed out of season had been buried there in his land by a poacher, and he notified authorities. It is believed that Anthony Spilotro and his brother were ambushed when they arrived. Both men were severely beaten and then killed. Tony Spilotro was reportedly struck with a hammer repeatedly and in a savage manner, and then suffocated. His brother Michael's fate was similar. Unlike in the movie Casino, in which the Spilotro character, played by Joe Pesci, is beaten with a baseball bat, there was no forensic evidence that the men had been buried alive or beaten with bats. A hit team that included mobster Nick Calabrese and 10 other outfit killers and hitmen who were waiting in the basement of the home when the brothers arrived said he tackled Michael Spilotro and held his legs while another mobster strangled him with a rope. He said he heard Tony Spilotro ask his executioners, "Can I say a prayer?" There was no reply. The manner in which the brothers were killed, brutally beaten and then suffocated, was intended to send a clear message. Spilotro had crossed a line, and there was no tolerance for his behavior anymore. The brutality of the murders was in line with the violent nature of mob executions, meant to discourage anyone from thinking they could challenge the outfit. After Spilotro's murder, his death was viewed as a turning point in the history of the Chicago outfit in Las Vegas. His killing was seen as the result of a power struggle within the organization, as well as a way to eliminate a dangerous and unpredictable figure. Following the wild escapades with Spilotro and his antics in Vegas, up to and including all the heat brought down on the outfit in a very public manner, the outfit steadily lost its grip on Las Vegas in the following years, and the city began to change as federal investigations increased. Some say that Las Vegas was better under mob control, that they knew how to give players a better experience and took care of things in-house without involving law enforcement. Either way, it is clear that Vegas is a very different place now, and Spilotro's influence, for better or worse, cannot be denied. In the end, Anthony the Ant Spilotro and his brother both suffered the same fate that they brought down on many in their lifetime. A cold, grisly murder, a gruesome and painful way to die with no mercy, followed by a shallow grave. All right, folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of the MOA Broadcast True Crime Series. Thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the show. A lot of good information there. Wish I had more time, but we got to keep it a nice, reasonable length so everybody stays engaged. And 35 minutes feels like a good time for that. Remember, if you have any questions, shoot us an email at info@gearconvoy.com or stop by the website, www.gearconvoy.com. All kinds of good information there and good survival supplies and other stuff that you'd be certainly interested in. All that being said, we're going to wrap this up and we'll see you next time. Remember, folks, don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare for it. If you wait, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.